I want to encourage you to take a Bible and open it up to the book of Romans, the first chapter, and put your marker there. We will look at a couple of other passages briefly before we get there, but that's going to be our main text for the day, and I want you to study along with me. It's good to be here this morning. It's good to see some who've been out and are back with us. It's good to have visitors with us. We appreciate and welcome all. And I want to encourage, I don't always say this, but if you have questions, concerns, comments on a lesson, please feel free to talk with me about that. One of the things that I've encouraged through the years, strongly encouraged, is regular Bible reading and study. I mean, after all, Matthew 7:21 says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven." How do you do God's will if you don't know God's will? And the only way to know God's will is to listen to God as He speaks to us through the Scripture. We ought to be, as 1 Peter 2, verse 2 says, like newborn babes desiring that pure milk of the Word that we can grow thereby. I've done that for many years, tried to encourage that. And I know many of you engage in regular study. But one of the things that I guess is a relatively new habit of mine is trying to encourage the taking of notes on your daily reading. It's something, I can't point to a verse and say you have to do it. And so therefore, I don't do a test. I don't ask everybody to hold up their hands if they do it. But I can tell you, if you stop and make just a few notes, it makes so much difference, or at least it has for me. And I'm not talking about elaborate notes. You don't have to write a commentary. But when you take some notes, what they do is they force you to think a little bit deeper, to make sure, what am I seeing here? And it also, particularly if you're reading various passages, you don't just have one section of Scripture. Sometimes it helps you to see how things tie together. And my lesson today is entitled, Faith as Revealed in Romans 1. And it really grew out of some notes I was taking. I've read Romans 1 a number of times, as I'm sure you have. I've had the privilege of teaching Romans several times. But as I was making my notes on it, and like I say, I'm just trying to make some brief notes. Some thoughts about faith really came together for me. These are not going to be something you've never heard of before. But just seeing them in this text helped me, and I hope it'll help you. Romans 1, of course, is the beginning of the book. The first 15 verses are primarily greetings, some explanation of his desire to come to be with them, why he hadn't been there before. Then at verse 16, he starts into the main part of the book. The gospel's God's power to save. The just will live by faith. And we need that saving gospel because God's wrath is revealed against sin. And he goes on in the remainder of the chapter to say, sin is a real problem. It has filled the Gentile world. And he'll then in the second chapter say, and the Jewish world, and on. But look at some thoughts with me about faith in Romans 1. And the first one that jumps out at me is that faith rests upon evidence. I know a lot of people, their view of faith is, well, you just choose to believe. Despite the evidence, contrary to reason, you've made some leap in the dark and you have faith. Well, I grant you, faith does have to believe in things it can't see. Hebrews 11 and verse 1, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. But look at Romans 1 and verse 20. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. As he begins to lay out the sins of the Gentile world, he said there's no excuse for it. Because, and isn't this a great phrase? The invisible things, things that nobody can see with their naked eye, are clearly seen by the things that are made. When you look about at creation, it ought to just cause you to stop and say, unreasonable to believe in God? It is far more unreasonable to believe that all of this came from nothing. That out of some disorder, all of this order and design came about. I mean, we just recognize, if you're walking through the woods and you come upon, a tangled mass of trees and they're uprooted here and there, you think, okay, maybe a tornado came through here. But if you come walking through the woods and suddenly there's this clearing and there's a 2-story house, some cars parked in the carport or, sitting outside the garage because, they got too much junk in the garage to put their expensive car in there, do you think, wow, another accident happened and that house just happened to appear there? No. You know that somebody planned it, somebody cleared it, someone built it. All of those things happened, not by accident. It's been used for many years, the watchmaker. And maybe take the computer. Take all those parts of a computer. Try this. Take your most expensive computer this afternoon and disassemble it. And put it in a big box and shake it. And just keep shaking it. And watch it come together and perform better than it's ever performed before. No, children, please don't do that to your parents' computer. It took planning. It took multiple someones to design it, to build it. And then you look at the human body. The human body is far more complex in its working. The whole universe. I think about the solar system. I have no interest in knowing this, but if I needed to know when high tide at Orange Beach would occur on October the 30th in 2030, I could find out because of this orderly universe in which we live. Sometimes I think about, most of the time I just take it for granted. Or I don't even take it for granted. I don't even stop to realize. But here we are animals in some sense. In another sense we're not. But we share some characteristics with them. We breathe in. And our lungs extract oxygen from the air. And then what do we breathe out? We breathe out carbon dioxide. And then you got all these plants. They don't have lungs, but what do they take in through their leaves? They take in carbon dioxide. What do plants give off? They give off oxygen. Isn't that, how can you say? Oh, it just all happened by accident. It just worked out that the lightning striking the primordial soup. No, that just cannot be. And one of the things I was really impressed with several years ago, I was using a workbook in a class called Unraveling Evolution by Dr. Joshua Gertler. And he has a great long discussion of this one-celled flagellum, that he talks of, or some kind of, it has flagellum on it, but this one-celled animal, little creature, and the amazing details of it. How many parts are in a one, we think one cell is small. No, there's so many parts to it. I don't mean Charles Darwin wasn't an intelligent man. But when Charles Darwin posited the theory of, maybe out of this chemical soup, a one-celled life emerged, and then that one cell split into two, he didn't have the capability of knowing what we know now about the complexities of even a one-celled creature. A one-celled creature is not just some, simple one-celled. They are complex operations. And, so evidence is there. Look at Acts, the 14th chapter. Just a couple other passages quickly. Paul speaks of God, verse 15, who made the heaven, the earth, the sea, and all things that are in them, who in bygone generations allowed all nations to walk in their own ways. Nevertheless, he did not leave himself without witness, in that he did good, gave us rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, filling our hearts with food and gladness. To this Gentile audience that engaged in idolatry, even wanted to worship Paul and Barnabas, he said there's a witness in nature. In Psalm 19, the psalmist said that the heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament shows his handiwork. When you look up, you ought to see the evidence of God. Day unto day utters speech, night unto night reveals knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Why do I believe in a God I can't see? Well, because by the things that are made, his invisible attributes are clearly seen. I know there is some power, some godhood. But the reality is this. All I can know from nature is there has to be a higher power. From the design of this universe, there has to be a designer. How do I know it's the God of the Bible? Well, back up in the chapter to verse 4. We'll start at verse 3 as he speaks of Jesus. Concerning his Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, who was born of the seed of David according to the flesh, and declared to be the Son of God with power according to the Spirit of holiness by the resurrection from the dead. The resurrection is so crucial to the study of what we call evidences. Jesus repeatedly made a claim that his disciples would try to dismiss. In fact, Peter would rebuke him. He'd say, I'm going up to Jerusalem. They're going to deliver me up, scourge me, kill me. But he said, on the third day I will rise. On another occasion, give us a sign. He said, the only sign you're going to be given at this point, after he's done all these miracles, is the sign of the prophet Jonah. As Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the belly of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. Now, anybody can make those claims. People make outrageous claims all the time. You ever watched infomercials late at night? People can say anything. Does that make it true? No. But look at 1 Corinthians 15. Look at what is said here about those outrageous claims that he would be killed and raised up. He says this is the key to the gospel. The key to the gospel that saved you. Verse 3, for I delivered to you first of all that which I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he was seen by Cephas, then by the 12. After that, he was seen by over 500 brethren at once, of whom the greater part remain to the present, but some have fallen asleep. After that, he was seen by James, then by all the apostles. Then last of all, he was seen by me also, as by one born out of due time. When Paul says that Jesus was declared to be the Son of God with power by the resurrection from the dead, he is not talking about, we heard this might have happened, and so we have decided we will believe it. No, he says Jesus appeared to the apostles. Jesus appeared to him. Jesus appeared to more than 500 men at once. And I want you to think about the character of those witnesses. These are men who were skeptical. You know, Peter would say, Lord, it's not going to happen to you, before it ever happened. And then when Jesus died, those men were crushed. Think about, and he doesn't mention them here in 1 Corinthians 15, but they're mentioned in the gospel accounts, the women who became the witnesses. Do you remember what they went to the tomb to do on the first day of the week? They didn't go there to say, let's go and see the empty tomb because Jesus will have risen today. No, they went to further anoint the dead body of Jesus. They didn't expect him to be risen. Why did the apostles go into all the world preaching the gospel? Because it made them famous? It brought them great riches? No, sometimes read 1 Corinthians 4. As Paul talks about what kind of treatment they received. They were viewed as a spectacle to the world, treated as the offscouring of the world. They would be put to death because of their faith in Jesus Christ. Now, when people in a position to know and with everything to lose become witnesses of the resurrection, that's something you can build your faith on. And if you can believe, as the evidence points to, that he was raised from the dead, then you believe every other claim he made. And I can read in Matthew 19, Mark 10, in the context he's being asked about divorce. But what he does is he goes back to creation. And he says, that account's true. I believe in that. He endorses the story of Jonah and Sodom and Gomorrah. I can believe in those stories because I'll believe anything from a man that can tell me I will die and rise on the third day and then do that. My faith ought to rest upon evidence. But there's a second key point here in Romans 1. Not just creation and resurrection as evidence, but that faith is obedient. Look at a few verses with me. Verse 5 of the first chapter. Through him, through Jesus, we have received grace and apostleship for obedience to the faith among all nations for his name. Now, you can keep your finger or your marker there, but I want you to turn to the 16th chapter. That's the last chapter. And I want you to notice what phrase practically bookends the book. Verse 25. Now to him who is able to establish you according to my gospel and the preaching of Jesus Christ, according to the revelation of the mystery kept secret since the world began, but now made manifest, and by the prophetic scriptures made known to all nations, according to the commandment of the everlasting God, for obedience to the faith. To God alone wise be glory through Jesus Christ forever and ever. Obedience to the faith. And I'm not sure why the King James and the New King James have obedience to the faith. The definite article is not there in the Greek before faith. And the English Standard just translates it, the obedience of faith. He opens the book, he closes the book by speaking of the obedience of faith. It is faith that's going to save us. We are called upon to trust in the God who saves the undeserving. The book of Romans makes this so clear. Turn to chapter 4. I want you to read with me how salvation comes about in such an undeserved way. And he uses Abraham as an example. What then shall we say that Abraham our father has found according to the flesh? For if Abraham was justified by works, he has something to boast about, but not before God. For what does the Scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Now to him who works, the wages are not counted as grace, but as debt. But to him who does not work, but believes on him who justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted for righteousness. Just as David also describes the blessedness of the man to whom God imputes righteousness apart from works. Blessed are those whose lawless deeds are forgiven and whose sins are covered. Blessed is the man to whom the Lord shall not impute sin. Many go to chapter 4, and they'll say, see, our obedience has nothing to do with it because he says it's not of works. No, it is not of the kind of works that allow a man to boast before God. To say, God, you owe me this. But chapter 4 doesn't appear out of nowhere. Chapter 4 follows the opening of the book in which he speaks of the obedience of faith. Chapter 4 is saying to us, folks, there's not a one of us that has God in a position of debt. He owes it to me. Because our salvation came when God forgave us. Verse 7, blessed are those whose lawless deeds are forgiven, whose sins are covered. Why do I stand here today? Why are you here today with the hope of heaven? Because of sinless perfection? No, because of forgiveness. You put your faith in the God who will forgive. But you also understand, as he's talking about Abraham. Verse 12, he said that Abraham is the father of circumcision to those who not only are of the circumcision, but who also walk in the steps of the faith which our father Abraham had while still uncircumcised. He used Abraham as the example of the man that had no boast before God. But then he says, Abraham's faith led to certain steps. We walk in the steps of that faith. In the 6th chapter, in verse 17. Now, keep things together here. The 4th chapter, blessed is the man whose lawless deeds are forgiven, whose sins are covered. Chapter 6, verse 17. But God be thanked that though you were slaves of sin, yet you obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine to which you were delivered. And having been set free from sin, you became slaves of righteousness. When did we become that blessed one whose lawless deeds are forgiven? That man whose sins are covered? When we obeyed from the heart. When our faith led us to do what he told us to do. That's when we were forgiven. The concept of faith only, as used today, it didn't originate with Paul. Paul said it's only by faith that we can be saved, but he never said it's by faith only. There's a huge difference. Only by putting one's trust in God and having a faith that is an obedient faith. The obedience of faith. Obey from the heart. And along that line, let me suggest to you, our faith ought to be seen. Not just by God, but by others. Verse 8, first, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all, that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. Think with me for just a moment. Faith. Faith, isn't it really an internal thing? It's an attitude. It's a mindset. It is that which I have within me. And yet people are talking about the faith of these people in Rome. Rome's the center of it was the center of that universe then. It was the largest city, and people everywhere are talking about, man, those people have faith. How do they know that? Well, you come to chapter 16 and verse 19, he says something very similar. For your obedience has become known to all. Verse 8, their faith is spoken of throughout the world. Chapter 16, verse 19, their obedience is known. If I truly trust in God, it's going to be reflected in actions. And here's the great challenge for us. We're not to live so as to be seen. You know, Matthew 6, you don't do your works to be seen of others. But in the very chapter before that, Matthew 5, 13 through 16, he talks about your light shining and being seen. If we are a people who truly trust in God, and that trust in God leads us to seek to do His will, to be obedient to Him, people are going to notice that about us. What I ought to want to be known for is that I trust God's every word. I trust God in every action, or I might say inaction. Sometimes God doesn't do what I would like for Him to do, by my prayers. I pray for God to grant healing. I pray for God to, help someone have a, better job. Just different things that I pray for. God does nothing that I see. I need a faith that trusts Him. I think sometimes there are those who have the idea that faith is somewhat like when the devil took Jesus up on the temple and he said, if you're the Son of God, throw yourself down from here and He'll send His angels to catch you. And Jesus replied, it's written, you shall not tempt the Lord your God. Faith, trusting God, does not call upon us to be reckless, to tempt God, but it does give us, true faith gives us a peace that others can see. Philippians 4, in verse 6, Paul says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. If our faith is like theirs, being spoken of throughout the whole community, if our children are seeing faith in us, part of what they're seeing is that we're not anxious, that we're accepting. We accept God's word. We accept God's will. We have a peace that passes understanding. And going back there to Romans 1, look at verses 11 and 12. For I long to see you, that I may impart to you some spiritual gift, so that you may be established. That is, watch this, that I may be encouraged together with you by the mutual faith both of you and me. Who needs to see my faith? Well, the world needs to see my faith. The world needs to see your faith, your co-workers, your fellow students, your neighbors, your unbelieving family members. But who else? We all need each other's faith. We all need that mutual faith that encourages us together. Every Christian has moments of struggle, moments of difficulty. And the faith of others ought to be a help to them, an encouragement to them. We need one another. One of the reasons I need to guard my faith is because maybe you need it. You need to guard your faith and make it strong and make it visible, because I may need it that day. We need to be encouraged by the mutual faith of one another. And notice something else in this context. Verse 13. Now I do not want you to be unaware, brethren, that I often planned to come to you, but was hindered until now. How's our faith when we're hindered? You know, I remember one time, this is something I'm still working on, trying to be a little more organized, a little, better at that kind of thing. But I got one of these planners that, it blocked out your day in 15-minute increments. And, I was going to follow the instructions, and I was doing this, I had this, and, I had my day. Well, not long into it, phone rings. Then I'm on the phone with somebody for 15 or 20 minutes. And, oh boy, now I got to shift everything. And then something else happens, and suddenly, things don't always go the way we plan. That doesn't mean we don't make plans. Paul was still making plans to go to Rome. But he'd been hindered before. Hindrances are part of life. Folks, things don't always go the way I want. How's my faith then? That's one of the great tests of our faith. When things, it can be big things, it can be small things. But life doesn't always, I've got these great plans. I was hindered, he said. Often, he said, I often plan to come to you. I don't know where all those fit into the book of Acts. But he had wanted to go to Rome before he ever got there. It just didn't work out. But he continued to have faith. Let's pray, as 1 Timothy 2:1-2 teaches us to pray, for quiet and peaceable lives. Pray for those in authority. But let me just say, quiet and peaceable lives are not always that which Christians live. It wasn't the way for the apostles. It wasn't that way for Jesus. But let's have faith anyway. And here's the great thing about it. When our lives are most upside down, when the world all around us is so topsy-turvy, that's our greatest opportunity to let our faith be seen. I don't want that life. I want smooth sailing. I want my days to go as I planned. Finish it off with some Rocky Road ice cream. Just everything be great. Perfect. But it's not always that way. It doesn't work that way. But a great opportunity to be seen. Last thing I want to mention this morning of faith is it expresses thanksgiving. I want you to pick up with me at verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify Him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Those of you who are familiar with Romans 1, and I would guess that is the vast majority of you, know that what he goes on to describe is a culture that in general was given over to idolatry. It was given over to unnatural acts of immorality. It was filled with all kind of unrighteousness and ungodliness. They were hateful and hating one another. It was a terrible place. Where did it start? It started when they stopped glorifying God and being thankful. They stopped acknowledging that every good and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, James 1:17. They knew God at one time. He said, but they quit glorifying Him. They quit being thankful to Him. True faith is not going about patting ourselves on the back, congratulating ourselves on all that we have accomplished. In 1 Timothy 4, you just think about what he says about every food is good if it's received with thanksgiving. It has been said of many that they were self-made men who worship their Creator. And I think that sometimes, if we're not careful, that becomes our view. That we congratulate ourselves on all the things we've accomplished and we've provided. And yes, God expects us to work. But He wants us to realize that before we take a bite, that's a gift from Him. And even more importantly, we are giving Him the glory for our salvation. Chapter 4 and verse 4, we don't say, well, God, you owe me this. What you did is you justified the ungodly. Remember Paul in 1 Timothy 1 talking about being the chief of sinners. That we have the attitude, you forgave. That you gave me something I did not deserve. When we fail in thanksgiving, it just leads to so many problems. And that's what the rest of the chapter is about. But we become proud. I don't know many sins the Bible speaks of more often than pride. Warns against it. Chapter 12, verse 3 of Romans, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, but to think soberly. God has dealt to each one the measure of faith. We may not think about it this way, but so often, mistreatment of others, it begins with a lack of acknowledgement of God and thankfulness to God for all His undeserved blessings upon us. Because we mistreat others oftentimes because we look down upon others. And we think of them as less than us because look at all that we have done and we've accomplished, instead of seeing ourselves as simply the recipients of God's great blessings. What happens, and what I think has happened in general in this country, is we've not become like the Gentile world of Romans 1, where we have made complete idolatry and rejected Yahweh the God. We've just reshaped Him. We've just made Him a little more amenable to our desires and our ends as a culture. Our culture is filled with immorality. 1 Corinthians 6, the warning, do not be deceived. The unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God. And he says, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners will inherit the kingdom of God. We're a nation of fornicators. We're a nation of adulterers and homosexuals and thieves and covetous, even those that don't steal. There's so much greed and drunkenness in this world, and so much reviling, even among religious people. How can that be? Well, in part, it is because we're not looking up to God, the true God, as the giver of everything. We're looking to ourselves as our own God. Oh, we'll acknowledge God when He suits our needs. A true spirit of thankfulness is the spirit of humble faith that says, it's not of me, it is of you. We need to see that and be truly thankful. Faith is absolutely vital. He never speaks of faith only, but He does speak of the importance of faith. It is essential. We're justified by faith. But realize that faith The three things to take today. It rests upon evidence. It's going to be put into practice if it's true biblical faith. And it ought to lead us to a deep gratitude toward God. As we close, let me ask you the question. Has your faith led you to obedience? Have you, verse 3, been baptized into the death of Jesus Christ? If not, why not? Why not come while we stand and sing together? Thank you for watching this video. We're glad that you have found our channel, and in fact, while you're here, we would encourage you to subscribe to the Jones Road Church of Christ channel. We have several videos already up, and we believe you'll find these to be true to God's Word, helpful to you in your journey toward God. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us and let us know how we can help you.